the prophet. Why is that a bad thing? Use it.
Because all my visions lead to horror.
Because you lose control.
Because I gain it. Johnny, do you believe in me?
Paul Atreides is still alive.
Deal with this prophet.
Show me who you are.
Your father was a weak man.
This world is beyond cruelty. You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades. My family's been fighting them for centuries. They were massacred alongside my father.
Your father didn't believe in revenge. We believe in Fremen.
Let me fight beside you.
Reload!
He said that.
I got that. Thanks.
I won't be fighting for him. I'm fighting for my people.
You young pup.
Do you believe in Paul?
There are signs. Look who's back from the dead.
I will do what must be done.
We gave them something to hope for.
That's not hope!
It's not a prophecy. It's a story. I will love you as long as I breathe.
This prophecy is how they enslave us!
I don't care what you believe. I believe.
I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis!
He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. Big surprise. New Dune Part 2 trailer. We'll break it down. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references here. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. The movie's coming out later this year. There's a bunch of new footage in this, a bunch of new reveals, and characters that weren't in the last trailer. We get our first look at Christopher Walken as Emperor Shaddam IV. The backstory between him and Duke Leto Atreides is actually pretty interesting too, because they have so much history that predates the events of the first movie or the first book. The whole idea is that even though the Emperor is much older than Leto Atreides was, he respected and admired him. He was his adoptive cousin. And a lot of people believe that he wanted to betroth his oldest daughter, Arulin, played by Florence Pugh, to the Duke Leto Atreides, but she was just too young at the time. It certainly would have solved a lot of problems because he didn't have any male heirs, so people just assumed that he would either marry his daughter to another powerful member of the Landsraad, or he would wind up adopting another son, and that son would take the Golden Lion throne. But the other big theory is that a lot of people believe that the reason why he secretly just didn't go ahead and do that and just wait till Arulin was old enough to consummate the marriage with Leto was all because of the Bene Gesserit order. Arulin's mother, Shaddam's wife and the mother of all of his daughters, was a Bene Gesserit witch, and unlike Duke Leto, he had no regular highborn wife before he was with Jessica. So the Emperor had always been married to this Bene Gesserit witch. The belief is that originally the Bene Gesserit had other plans for Arulin when she was born, and their complicated plan to create the Kwisatz Haderach through the careful breeding intermarriage program between all the great houses and the Landsraad was basically what they tell you during the events of the movies and the books, that they always wanted Lady Jessica to give Leto a daughter and wed that daughter to Fade Harkonnen, who was the Baron's chosen heir. He still is, still alive in the movies right now. The Baron has no natural son. He's actually gay in the story, so he doesn't actually have a wife, but he chooses Fade as his successor. And Arulin marrying Leto outside of that plan would have completely thrown things off the rails, even though that's ultimately what wound up happening through the course of the story, with Lady Jessica giving birth to Paul, a son. But at least early on, Shaddam's power in the known universe was completely dependent on the Bene Gesserit's workings behind the scenes. Like, it was a very complicated web of Bene Gesserit plans that kept him in power. And ultimately, he just gave in to their wishes for their larger long-term plans for the Kwisatz Haderach, so he just did whatever the Bene Gesserit told him to do when it came to his daughters. During the events of the movies, they kind of want to make him seem like that, like he's completely dependent upon the Bene Gesserit's advice. So they're meant to feel like the ones who really have the power in the universe. And the Emperor only orchestrated the downfall of Leto during the events of the first movie much later in life, after the Duke's popularity in the Landstrahd started to make him more popular with all the great houses than the Emperor himself. So he slowly became more paranoid over time. But up to that point, he had been friends with Leto Atreides. Not great friends, but they both greatly respected each other. It'll be really interesting to see what Christopher Walken's version of this character is like during the movie. We only hear a couple lines of dialogue from him when he's yelling at Paul Atreides. Sounds like it's happening at the end of this movie, and we'll see if they wind up splitting this movie into a part 3 as well. The scene where he's yelling at Paul about his father Leto being a weak man seems like it's from this scene here where they're all getting ready to fight, where he's getting ready to fight Fade Harkonnen. It's sort of this big moment of him offering an ultimatum to the Emperor, like, either you acquiesce to my plan, I'll marry your daughter Irulan and become the new Emperor of the universe and will control spice, or you don't agree and I'll stop all spice production. And it will bring the gears of the universe to a grinding halt. No one will be able to travel anywhere. It'd basically take the entire universe back to the Dark Ages. And as the saying goes, the spice must flow. And ultimately, anybody in the universe, that's all they care about, no matter what faction they come from. They just want more spice because it is the means for them to hold on to their power. Nobody's empires, whatever faction they come from, work if there is no spice. One of the things you see at the beginning of the trailer, too, is it seems like Paul is slowly entering into the Fremen society. Chani's trying to tell him, like, no, they don't want to have you. And he's like, yeah, I got it. They hate me. And he's slowly trying to win them over. You saw this during the events of the original David Lynch movie. He slowly begins to train them in the Atreides fighting ways, as well as the Bene Gesserit fighting techniques, making them even more powerful against the Harkonnens and the Emperor Sardaukar. Most of the fighting you see in the trailer is against the Harkonnens, though. Like, all these armor suits are Harkonnen armor suits. The Baron comes back to Arrakis. This is his signet ring that's being kissed. That's a weird oily substance that he was bathing in this all over his fingers here. This is them cleaning up the bodies from the massacre of the Atreides in the first movie. One of the other big things in the trailer you notice is there's way more of Zendaya's Chani character. The director said that she was just a much bigger part of the story during the second movie, which is why you didn't see her in the first as much. She seems much more active in their raids against the Harkonnens. We see Paul encounter Gurney again, which is also something we saw in the previous versions of the story. He survived the Harkonnens massacre by throwing in with another group of Fremen in a different part of the desert. Most of the people from the first movie will be coming back for this. Even Jason Momoa's Duncan Idaho character will eventually come back into the story. Won't really talk too much about that because it kind of gets into spoilers. Jason Momoa was joking about that, like, just you wait, I'll be back, don't you worry. There's this whole conversation with Lady Jessica and Stilgar about belief in Paul, what he believes, and over the course of the trailer, you do see him become a believer. Like, it doesn't matter what's true, I believe in this. Ultimately, it seems like he sees what Paul can do and starts to believe in him. You also hear Paul arguing about this with Jessica later in the trailer too, and what they're talking about is this whole myth of Muad'Dib and the savior that the Fremen believe are going to come and rescue them eventually, or help save them in some way. And that's something that the Bene Gesserit have been orchestrating for a long time now, for many years, creating a prophecy that will play into their plans for the eventual arrival of the Kwisatz Haderach, so that the Bene Gesserit can eventually control Arrakis and spice production. Because remember, spice is power. Spice equals power in the universe. This is the whole concept of the Golden Path in the Kwisatz Haderach, finding the perfect timeline for humanity and leading them down that path. But really just boils down to the Bene Gesserit wanting control of the universe. During the first movie, Paul and Jessica talk about this when they arrive on Arrakis, like this whole idea of a savior, quote unquote, and Jessica knows what's really going on. Like, oh yeah, this is a false prophecy that the Bene Gesserit have cooked up. So when the Harkonnens attack and they need to survive, they say we should play on this idea of the prophecy. We should just play into it. Even though we think that it's false, we should pretend like you are this mythical savior being. So at least at first, Paul is knowingly misleading the Fremen, causing them to believe that he is that savior. But ultimately, through his actions, they all start to believe he really is that savior. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. That also plays into the idea when he's telling Gurney that all these visions lead to horror. In his dreams, he sees all these people committing atrocities in his name, and it horrifies him. This is them getting ready to take the Waters of Life, and this is the previous Fremen's Reverend Mother before Lady Jessica becomes their new Reverend Mother. She also winds up having to take the Waters of Life as part of that process too. Within the story, the Water of Life is literally the bile of the baby sandworms. And even though they don't reference it in this trailer, the big thing is that she's still pregnant with her daughter, with the Duke's daughter, when she takes the Waters of Life, and they're not really sure what that's going to do to the baby. I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk about that when the movie comes out. We'll see if they include any moments like that in the trailer, because for the most part, she's still pregnant during this early part of the story. The events of the David Lynch movie kind of speedrun the story of the first couple of books, which is why you see Paul's younger sister. I don't know if we'll actually see her during the events of Dune Part 2. This scene of Paul pulling the crysknife with everybody standing around him is him getting ready to fight Fade Harkonnen. The whole idea is that Fade is meant to be the Baron's other nephew, the son of his brother who abdicated the throne, allowing the Baron to become the Baron in the first place. He's meant to be Raban's younger brother and the one who the Baron favors. Even though Raban is useful to him, Raban is kind of like an animal, like a wild animal the Baron just uses to squeeze people. Fade is the person the Baron views as his potential successor. I think that all the black and white scenes of Fade fighting in the gladiator pits here are on Gati Prime, the Harkonnens' home world, and it's Margot, Lady Margot, watching Fade as part of her mission to seduce him and get his genetic material. One of the other big things during the trailer footage too is that Irulan seems like she's much more active in the story than she was in the first one, even though they kind of imply that during the events of the David Lynch movie. She's the person who ultimately chooses to accept Paul's proposal to marry her and him to rule the universe. The Emperor doesn't want to have anything to do with it, but she smartly realizes that's the only path forward for them. When you hear him saying deal with this prophet, he might actually be talking to the Baron or to Fade. Even though I love the first movie, it just feels like this movie has so much more action. It's sort of like the difference between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, but in reverse. Seems like they're hyping up a huge rematch between Gurney and Raban. Can't wait to see that. The big line they go out on in the trailer, "Long live the fighters," is also right out of the books.
Long live the fighters!
Just in general, it's a great trailer. I think it's a lot better than the first trailer. There's so much new footage. If there are any Easter eggs that I didn't talk about during the video that you spotted, just write them below in the comments. You could talk all day about what's going on here. We're in the middle of Marvel's Secret Invasion episodes. My full episode 3 video will post next week. You can click here for that episode 3 video, and click here to learn about Ben Affleck coming back as Daredevil in Deadpool 3. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.